this week we're going to start topic 9, and this is on values and ethics. And a lot of what we've discussed to this point has been guided by your values and ethics and how you've been raised, even if you didn't realize that that was what the guiding force was. Ignore all of these important dates. This doesn't apply to your semester. So, for the case of this discussion, values are defined as the personal beliefs about the good, the just, and the beautiful, personal beliefs that propel us to action, to a particular kind of behavior in life. So, what this is saying is that our values are what makes us make certain decisions in our life based around what we view as being important. I like to think of our values. So, if you were an architect, you're not going to just go out into the world and start building a building without having any plan for it. So, I like to think of our values as being like that blueprint, that plan. So, yes, we have goals and plans for ourselves, but we can't do it without that foundation, that plan ahead of time. And that's what our values provide for us. So how we develop a value system starts, as with a lot of things that we've discussed this semester, in our earliest childhood, with our earliest caregivers, those that are a part of our life, teaching us those fundamental skills. Whether or not we realize it, every decision that we make is based around our value systems. And this psychologist Steven Springer came up with this theory that there are actually 6 value systems that people tend to fall into. And it kind of helps summarize where you put your greatest value in life. The first one is the theoretical person. And this is the person that likes to be able to see for themselves what it is that they're going to believe in. So they want to be able to prove that what they see is real. So for the theoretical person, then people that believe like in God or higher beings or things that are less concrete and are more abstract theories are difficult for this person to understand, because they believe that in order to value it, in order to believe in it, it should be something that you can observe and see for yourself. The next one is the economic person, and this is the person that puts their productivity, their ability to be successful ahead of all else. Now, a lot of times the economic person gets a bad rap. They're seen as being money hungry or greedy, and that's not necessarily the truth. It's just that they believe that their personal success, their wealth, their bank account, their credit score are all reflections of them and their ability to work hard and make sacrifices and such. The third is the aesthetic person, and this is the person that puts beauty and presentation ahead of all else. So this type of person, again, gets that bad reputation sometimes as being trivial, only caring about the surface area. But again, that's not necessarily the case. For them, how they present on the outside is a representation of who they are on the inside. So they feel very much, and like parents with children that expect their children to look a certain way and always present a certain way, it's because that they feel that that is a direct reflection on who they are. So if they're a mess, if like the aesthetic person would never run to the grocery store in their pajamas, because they feel like that is showing the world that they don't care, that they're a mess, that they are disorganized. And so the aesthetic person wants to look on the outside a representation of who they are on the inside. Number 4 is the social person, and this is the person that values relationships, connections, friendships, social ties, whether it be family or friends, above all else. They tend to get the reputation for having a high level of kindness, unselfishness, and willing to sacrifice sometimes their own personal needs for others. Number 5 is the political animal, and this is any politician I've ever known, met, heard of falls under this category, because these people are, power motivated, power driven. They want the attention on them. They want to, when you ask them, if you're on your deathbed, what do you want people to say about you? The political animal wants to have as many people know who they are as possible. They want to have made a mark. Donald Trump is a perfect example of this, that everything they do is driven around that need for being known, of having the control, having the power. 6 is the religious person, and this is just what it sounds like, the person that puts the greatest value on their religion, their spiritual beliefs, their connection to that theological way of thinking. So how our values develop, again, goes back to our families first, and then it trickles down. So our families set the foundation, but then once we start getting out into the world and we have teachers, we have friends, we have coworkers that start opening doors to us, to values and thoughts that maybe we hadn't previously been aware of or thought much of, and we start then learning that there's other things out there that we weren't necessarily taught in childhood. And that's where individuation comes in. So this is where we start taking the values that we were raised with, along with the things that we learned from others, and we start forming our own value systems. Like, okay, so yes, this is what my family raised me with. This is what I was taught growing up, but I don't necessarily believe this component. And so then you take on other aspects. So perhaps you were raised believing, maybe you were raised with a religious foundation, and part of that religious foundation was that marriage between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, goes against the beliefs of God and the religion you were in. Well, maybe then when you become an adult and you go out into the world, perhaps you meet people that have a different mindset, that are religious, involved in their churches, but believe that God accepted and loved all people, regardless of who they loved or who they married. And so you start questioning what you were raised with, and you start adapting your own thoughts and feelings based on this new information you've been raised, or you've come in contact with. So what individuation says is that once we start having other influences in our life, we start choosing what components of values from each of those sections we're going to adapt for ourselves. When it comes to religion and how religion guides us, so in my mind, I think of religion and spirituality as two separate things. You may feel differently on this, or raised differently, and that's completely, obviously fine. Have your own beliefs. But as far as I'm concerned, I think of religion as being kind of like the rule book. So you've got your Bible, you've got your Quran, you've got whatever guiding force that leads your religion, and that's kind of the rules, what you should follow, what you should, how your values should be created, should be based around this guidebook. And then you've got spirituality, which to me is more the relationship. So now you've got this foundation that your religion provided you. Well, now what's your personal beliefs, your personal connection, your relationship to your religion, to your gods, to your belief system? And that I also believe that people can have a spirituality without having religion. You don't necessarily need that rule book, that basis to guide your spirituality. You can be spiritual without necessarily believing in a certain specific religion. And again, that's my take on what I believe and how I've studied this information. Okay, so that's it for section 1. Going on to section 2. This one I'm going to be brief with. So there was a research study done where I think they took like 2,000 men and women, equal on each, and they asked them to rank what they valued most. And I'm going to just point out a few. It wasn't shocking, but I did find it funny that for men, they placed good health as last on that list, where women placed it higher up. And it's interesting to me, and if we were in class in person, we would discuss why this might be. Um, it's also interesting that men put happiness first, followed by a stable marriage, where women put the stable marriage first, followed by happiness. So, why this could be, is interesting to look at. And men putting, financial stability, career ahead of good health is, that kind of goes back to that long-standing belief that boys and men are raised with, in that they have to be the provider, they have to support, their family. And so it was just kind of interesting that this research, I believe it was early 2000s, mid 2000s that it was conducted, that even at that point, there's still this foundation of that belief that men have to be financially secure and financially stable in their career, even above their own personal health. So in the content section, if you go back to where the notes are at the bottom there, there's this poem, or this Robert Louis Stevenson's Daily Dozen. I would like you to read that, please, because it's really interesting. And one thing I want you to pay attention to is the year that this was written and how much of it pertains still today. Almost all of it still pertains today. And given when it was written, it's just crazy to think that each generation feels like they're the first ones to experience things. And then something like this just proves that we have continual life concerns, issues that carry over from generation to generation. Okay. When we're doing that individuation part, where we're separating our own beliefs from what we were raised and we come up with our own, we go through this process called values clarification. And this is when we are choosing freely of our own accord what things in life we're going to put value on and what we're going to treasure and feel is something worth taking action on. So you can read through this process of what people go through when deciding if something is worth valuing. There's the choice test. If I had a choice, would I still choose to value this? The time test. If something is truly of value to you, you're going to be willing to put time, energy, and effort into it. Then you've got the sacrificial test. Are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to give up something else to show that you put a value on this other thing? And then lastly is the emotion test. Do I feel satisfaction from placing value on this, or is there guilt or sadness involved? Sorry, I had to take a drink. Okay, and then we've got to the third section. So cognitive dissonance, and this is a very important term. We don't do the exam this semester, so it's not going to be brought up that way, but it is something I want you to be mindful of, because cognitive dissonance is something that people experience without even realizing that this is what they're experiencing. So this is when you have so remember, anytime you see the word cognitive, it has to do with thoughts, thinking, our brain, our mind. So cognitive dissonance is when we have two beliefs or values that are in direct conflict with each other. And because of this, it can cause you to feel unsettled. It can cause you to feel anxiety, stress, to have negative emotions involved. So an example of this would be the topic of abortion. So there are people that feel very strongly that abortion should be a personal choice, that every woman should have the right to choose for themselves whether or not they carry a pregnancy to term. And if for whatever reason they choose not to, that's their right. But that same person can feel just as strongly that they would never be able to or be willing to have an abortion, regardless of the situation. And so sometimes this can cause some internal conflict because, on one hand, you believe every woman has the right to make their own choice, but you also know for yourself it's not a choice you would ever be able to make. And so, if put into certain situations or discussions or the topics brought up, it can leave you feeling unsettled um, and even upset over the dissonance, the conflict that you're having within yourself. Justifying a sacrifice. So, this is a theory that says that we are going to put more value on something that we worked hardest for versus something that just comes easy. So, most of you, probably all of you, have taken a course at some point in your life because you were told that it was an easy A. And so, what justifying a sacrifice says is that, so say you're taking that easy A class, but you're also taking alongside it one of the hardest classes you've ever taken. So, for a lot of my students, anatomy and physiology is that for them. Yeah. And so, justifying a sacrifice would say if you busted your butt, you lost sleep, you stayed up and studied all night for an exam for anatomy and you got a B, that B is going to mean more to you than the A that was practically given to you for no reason. It's the idea that when we work hard for something, that the outcome of that has a higher value to us than stuff that is just handed to us. So, character and ethics. So, there's a video that you need to watch after this. It's very important you have to watch this video because it takes all of this into detail. So, Stephen Covey has written the book, and it's written in my I'm blanking on the suggested reading book on this, going back to the blackboard. It's I believe it's one of the suggested reading books, and I can't find anything right now. But Stephen Covey wrote this book on the pillars of success. And there's an entire section that he discusses our ethics with. And he divides ethics into two parts. There's either the character ethic or the personality ethic. And one thing that Stephen Covey feels strongly about is that we as a society have become very personality ethic focused. And with that shift in thinking and all this attention being put on the personality ethic, the character ethic is getting lost. And he feels that this is, in essence, the downgrade of society. It's what has broken us as a society, is that we no longer put the energy and time and effort into building our character and being the best person that we can be because we're so busy trying to be on the surface what we think we should be. I call it the social media self. So, you put out there what you want, how you want the world to view you. You put your altered selfies, you put how perfect your relationship is, when underneath that, the character part may not be that at all. So Covey goes into some great detail in that video. So if you go back to where the notes are, the bottom here, this video on character versus personality ethic, please make sure you watch that because it has really great examples and it goes into much more detail. He discusses the 6 pillars of character: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. And this idea that these are the foundation of that character development, that if we are going to have a strong character, we need to have these 6 parts. And citizenship means that understanding that we are part of a bigger picture, that it's not every man for himself. It's that we have a responsibility to the greater good, to our community, to our fellow citizens, to our neighbors, and that is just as important to our overall well-being and functioning as our individual personal character development. So Michael Josephson wrote this 10 key guidelines to character development. It goes hand in hand with what Covey said. You can read through those. Very important information. And then this part is something that I wanted to just point out is that we oftentimes think about from our own self what's important, but if you look at it from another's perspective, if you think about what is it that's important to the people I care about, these are the things that tend to be important to them. So keeping your promise. And he adds punctuality here, and I love that because oftentimes people don't respect the time of others. So you'll make a lunch date with somebody or you'll make plans to meet up, and then you're 15 minutes, a half hour, sometimes even an hour late for that meeting. And if you think about what that shows to the other person, your lack of punctuality is telling that other person two things. First, my time is more valuable than yours. I don't care if you're sitting there waiting for me because I had to do what I had to do, which made me late, and so my time is more valuable. It also says that I don't respect or put priority on the time that we made to be together. That the fact that I can be distracted or something else can come up and I'll just be late shows that that's where you rank in the list of priorities. Don't. Most of the rest of these are pretty self-explanatory as you go down the list. Okay, so that is it for this lecture section. Please make sure that you join us on Friday the 20th for our Zoom meeting so that I can give you the details on the 5-year plan assignment, which is the last main assignment of the semester. And please have a pen and paper with you so that we can go over, so that you can jot down any notes that I share when I'm going over that. Okay, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you Friday.